Underway. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome again to Marquette University Law School, the Lubar Center at Eckstein Hall. I'm Mike Goucher, and this is On the Issues. This is our continuing series of conversations with news and policymakers, people who are doing interesting, important work in this region and beyond. Today, we are joined by the mayor of the city of Milwaukee. Won't you please give a warm welcome to Tom Barrett.
Thank you, Mike.
And because politicians don't always have, nice things said to them, I'm actually going to begin by saying something nice. We appreciate your, let me finish. Then we can see if it's so nice. But no, I do. Speaking on behalf of the law school, I appreciate your availability since we began our public policy efforts here. You have been in this building many times. We appreciate that. We appreciate you taking time to be with us.
It's always fun to come.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. So let me begin with the sort of a state of the city question, because, when I talk to people about Milwaukee, including some of your staff members, we talk about the Milwaukee comeback, the renaissance of Milwaukee, and people are feeling pretty upbeat about things in the city. But in your 2020 budget message, you said Milwaukee's at a crossroads, and that sounds a little more foreboding. So describe why you think we're at a crossroads today.
Well, I was talking about the budget, and
Right.
with the budget, we are absolutely at a crossroads. But before I talk about that, I think to talk about the Renaissance is real. I think there's a lot of incredibly good things going on in the city right now. I think it surprised a lot of people. What I hear most often now from people who lived here and moved away and came back is they come and say, wow, so much has changed, so much has changed. But our financial situation has never been more precarious. And there are a number of factors that make this happen. Our two major sources of revenue are the property tax and the shared revenue program, which was instituted by state government in the early 1900s. And the whole theory behind shared revenue was the state didn't want different units of local government competing against each other, using taxes to compete against each other. So the deal that was struck, the grand deal that was struck, was that the state would collect the revenue through the income tax, now through the income tax primarily, sales tax, and it would share some of the revenue with local units of government. That worked fine through the 1980s, and then it started atrophying. And it has really atrophied very, very significantly, where we now receive less money than we did basically 2 decades ago.
In real dollars.
In real dollars. Mm-hmm. And people might say, well, yeah, but the state's hurting, I have a graph that shows just how much the state tax revenues have gone up and how much our help from the state has gone down. So you could say, well, what about property taxes? Well, there's a cap on property taxes, and I frankly don't want to see property taxes go higher. But if you look at major American cities around this country, where we really stand out is how much the handcuffs are on us in our ability to raise money locally. And I'm betting there are people here, and this is not a value statement, there are people in this room who don't live in the city, that come to the city and benefit from the city, and we have lots of visitors. Yet our revenue structure is so dependent upon these two sources of income, it is crippling, frankly. And at the same time, you've got our police department budget, which is by far our largest budget, growing, and the state laws are such that we have less control over that budget than any other budget. And we're now at the point where the budget for the Milwaukee Police Department is larger than the entire property tax levy for the city of Milwaukee. Wow. The budget for the Milwaukee Police Department is larger than the entire property tax levy for the city of Milwaukee. And this is the 5th consecutive year that this has happened. And I don't think there's another city in the state that comes close to that. And so it grows. And a large part of it is the state laws having to do with our labor negotiations with the police union. And so this year it will go up $5-6 million. But that translates into much fewer officers. So now you've got the
60 officers that you will not replace.
That's right.
There won't be layoffs.
There will be no layoffs.
Jobs that are no longer.
But in the most practical sense, we probably would have, we have classes. We always have a class near the end of the year. We probably would have a class in July of next year. And we probably won't have that class. And we won't. Now, I've got a plan to get us around that. But as things stand now, we won't have that. The other part, which has been a real education for me, is the pensions. And when I first became mayor, I never even thought about pensions. Maybe it sounds like malpractice to hear that, but it wasn't even an issue. And it wasn't an issue because from roughly 1991 through 2009, the pension fund was strong enough that the city didn't have to make an employer match. In 2009, my budget office came into me and said, we have to put money into the pension. I'm like, whoa, we never talked about the pension. And this is all done on actuarial analysis, and there's an independent pension board. And it was, you're gonna have to put $48 million into your budget. Now this is in 2009. And just to give you a context of that, $48 million was almost 20% of the levy. Our levy then was about $250 million. So imagine you've got a budget and you've got a brand new line item that constitutes 20% of your budget. So we did it though. We did it. In the next couple of years, it gyrated a little bit. So again, my budget office came back to me and said, this is not a good way to do this. We can't have these gyrations every year. Let's do a 5-year smoothing and let's project how much we have to give in a 5-year period. Not to game it, not to go up or down, but just to see what can we do. And so beginning in 2013, we had a 5-year period where we put $60 million in per year. And the final year we had to put a few extra million in just to make it work. So it worked. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. 2018, the pension board comes back and the actuaries come back and say, okay, now that number has to go to 60 million a year. So that's what we're doing now, 60 million a year. So 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, we'll put $60 million a year. The reason I started waving the flag in my budget speech is the actuaries are coming to us now and saying starting in 2023, that number is going to go up to $158 to $170 million a year. Now you see why I was upset. So I'm thinking, where's this money coming from?
Where does it come from?
So that's the problem. So now, I mean, I think the obvious question is, well, how does it rise that dramatically? What's the story here? Well, the story here is sort of twofold. One is there's an assumed rate of return, and all pensions have this. And we used a pretty rosy one for many, many years, 8.5%. And my budget office came to me and said, yeah, but we're hitting the numbers. We're hitting the numbers. And again, this is independent of my office, just to be clear. This is an independent pension board. And we brought it down to 8%. And now this calculation has us at 7.5%, which is much more in line with projections for public pensions. And the other factor is that our biggest users of the system by far are police and fire. And this is not a value judgment. This is not a criticism. It's just they're the ones that use it. Again, they're the ones we have the least control over the pension amount or about their income. So of the increase, 80% of that is law enforcement. And so I have to find a way, whether I'm mayor or not, this city's going to have to find a way to get additional revenue to meet those obligations and to meet the obligations of the city.
I have one alderman call it a looming fiscal tsunami. Is that an accurate?
I'd say that's pretty, yeah. I don't even know who that is, but I would not disagree with that.
Alderman Murphy, actually.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
But he did, maybe I'm speaking out of school. He said, Tom, I'm sort of a glass half empty guy, and you're the glass half full guy. I said, I've got to be the guy that is out there. We got to find some way to solve this problem.
So one potential solution that's been suggested in the last few weeks, it's been kicked around at other points in the city's history, is allowing the city of Milwaukee to raise its sales tax, or the county actually. You could get, different municipalities could get money from this. You go up 1%. And that would help you pay for police officers, help you meet some of these fiscal needs. The problem is, and I've talked to Speaker Voss about this, there seems to be no appetite in the Republican leadership in the state legislature to sign off on this, and they would have to sign off on this. So how do you overcome that?
So again, last comment I heard him say was something along the lines of, it's nearly impossible or something. And I'm thinking, okay, it's not impossible. It's nearly impossible.
Just a glass half full guy again, huh? Yeah.
I think the Majority Leader Fitzgerald said it was dead on arrival. And I was talking to your replacement on Meet the Issues at the American Heart Association talking. He said it's dead on arrival. I said, yeah, but we're at the Heart Association walk. This is where hearts come back. This is where people, again, I can't give up on this.
No.
I mean, and we can't give. If you love this city, we have to find a way to deal with this issue. It's just, and it's not hyperbole. This is real stuff.
Not to be Mr. Half-empty guy, but how do you convince somebody, for example, Scott Fitzgerald is running for Congress right now. Speaker Voss, I think, has been pretty outspoken on this. You really have to get some buy-in from them, don't you?
Well, if we have anybody here who lives in Wauwatosa or Brookfield or Waukesha and is in Senator Fitzgerald's district, obviously, the Milwaukee Police Association, which is a big backer of the Republicans, Milwaukee Metropolitan Area Chamber of Commerce, which has been very supportive of this effort. Because and what I've said, and I'll say it here too, I'll have any actuary take a look at these numbers. I mean, this is not something where we're hiding it. I would prefer to have people look at this and say, the guy's not crazy, that these numbers are real. And if I'm wrong, I'll be the happiest guy in the world. Because I don't relish the thought of saying, okay, we're going to cut more police officers. But there's another dynamic there that's at play that's important. At the same time, you have this pressure on the police department. There is nationally, and you saw it in the paper this week, a growing movement for putting more resources into crime prevention from a health perspective.
Right.
And I agree with that. Oakland is used as the model for this. What people aren't saying, though, in Oakland is they had a voter referendum that approved this. And so for those who I agree with that we need to do this, I need them to engage with me at the state level as well. I need business to engage with me at the state level. I have to keep fighting for this because, again, 2023, if I have to write a check for $100 million, where is that going to come from? And that's, again...
Those would have to be pretty dire cuts, wouldn't they? If you
and what you see with a lot of municipalities is they just stiff the fund. And we've never done that, and I don't intend to do that. I don't know what the council's going to do. But, again, if you look at our revenue mix, you're not going to find other cities our size that are limited in the revenue. And the sales tax, I call it the Cubs tax. The Cubs come up here and lose 3 to the Brewers, and let's hit them for a sales tax. You go to Chicago, you're paying over 9%. Even with a 1% increase in a sales tax here, you're at 6% or 6.5%. So you're still significantly below that, and we don't have anybody from outside the city that comes in that benefits from the police we have, if they have a medical emergency. All those are things that the residents are paying here, and here we've got one of the most highly concentrated group of poor people in the nation in the city. And so it isn't fair, it isn't right. And so of course I'm going to keep doing everything I can to change that. But I would love to have more allies. I'd be lying if I didn't say that.
I've got a lot of topics I want to get to today, and so we'll try and work through them in a fairly, not rapid fashion, but a fairly straightforward fashion. You made a distinction at the beginning of this. I used the word crossroads, and you said that describes the city's budget decision, and I think you do see the city having a bit of a renaissance, having the Milwaukee comeback, as it's sometimes called. Tell us about that renaissance. What is it that you see that makes you optimistic long-term about the future? What is happening in the city right now that you think bodes well for the future?
Well, if you look at the downtown area here, or the heart of the city as I describe it, the real estate values since 2004, 2005 are like 99.8% increase. So the value of the heart has gotten doubly strong. And my argument has always been, you've got to have a strong heart. You have to have a strong heart. And the heart of Milwaukee is stronger than it has been in a long time. Now, having a strong heart is important. And it's important for a couple of reasons. One is, if that value had remained the same and hadn't gone up, property taxes in the other part of the city would have gone up hundreds of dollars. Because it's that incredible growth that we've seen in the heart of the city that allows us to really pay for, if you're someone who lives on the west side and you want police protection, or you're on the south side and you want fire protection, or in the central city and you want libraries, it's the growth in the city, in the heart of the city, that has fueled our ability to do that. Even through the worst economic recession since the Great Depression, we've maintained city services at a pretty good level. Obviously, I want that to continue. But at the same time, so we've got this very strong heart. But as I was growing up, my mother had this saying that a mother is only as happy as her unhappiest child. And if you're a parent, you know what my mom was talking about. So I look around the city, and we've got way too much poverty, concentrated poverty, primarily on the north side and on the south side. And to me, that's all about getting more jobs. And so I've also taken it upon myself to figure, okay, what can we do to get more family-supporting jobs? Now, we'll start with the south side, because that's a little easier in the sense that you've got the Harbor District. And Komatsu has made the decision that it's going to have its North American headquarters there just at the end of Greenfield Avenue overlooking the lake. And we'll have hundreds of jobs there, good family-supporting jobs there on the south side. That's good. We're taking that piece of land, the old Solvay Coke site, and we're breathing life into it.
And Michael's Corporation.
And Michael's Corporation, less than a mile away. So you're seeing a huge ingestion of investment there. On the north side, a couple things. One, I think people would be surprised if they realized how much time I personally spend and our Department of City Development spends in trying to keep employers from leaving. And crime is a big issue. I'd be lying if I didn't say an issue. At the same time, we're doing everything we can at places like Century City, which is the old A.O. Smith site. And there, again, we've got something to tell now where Strauss is moving its meat operations from Franklin there because they want to be closer to the workforce. And Talgo is going to be adding another 70 people. You've got that. You've got Good City Brewing right there. So we're starting to see some momentum right there as well. Do we need more? We need a ton more. And this is the challenge we have. And the argument I've made to the business community is I go to a lot of meetings and I hear a lot of employers talking about how they can't find workers. And people from companies in Waukesha or Ozaki or Washington County. And they're talking many times about unskilled workers. And I have to admit, I scratch my head and I'm thinking, well, put the jobs near where the people who need the jobs live. If you put the jobs near where the people live, you're not going to have these transportation issues. You're not going to have all these parenting issues that if you're 10 minutes away as opposed to 45 minutes away. And I'll use Amazon as an example.
We were hoping to get a Century City.
I thought it would have been a positive atomic bomb. To have literally thousands of jobs on 30th and Capitol. And instead, we're going to have the single mom take the bus 45 minutes to Oak Creek, and then she's going to miss parent-teacher conferences, or kids aren't going to get immunized, and we're going to say she's a bad mom.
What ultimately did Amazon say to you? Because I know that was
the transportation, the distance to the expressway, that it's much more convenient.
To I-43.
To I-40. I mean, that's my sense. They really didn't say, but that's my sense. But I think we have to do some soul searching there, because Oak Creek, and I like Oak Creek has zero unemployment. And it's not as though Oak Creek is going to say, well, let's have all these low-income people move here. I don't see that happening. So is our expectation that low-income people have to ride a bus 45 minutes and we're fighting to keep the bus service alive? I think, and this is where I've challenged the business community, and they've responded. I think they've been very, very helpful. M7's been very, very helpful with Strauss, that we have to get more family-supporting jobs close to where the people live. It's that fundamental. How do we do that? We can't have just wastelands where there's no jobs. We have to, and that's a priority of mine.
Are you worried that the city, like a lot of big cities in America, is becoming really, and this is so cliche, but it is accurate, a tale of two cities, that Milwaukee has all these wonderful amenities for young professionals or people my age who moved downtown, and yet for way too many folks, they don't see that. They don't see that possibility.
Well, I do see that, but I'll just use something that just happened now a dozen years ago with one of the high-rise towers. For years, Milwaukee and the suburbs have had these battles about the sewers, about housing, and pleased that there be more housing available for lower, moderate income people in the suburbs. And those pleas were met with either defiance or just ignored. And it's only I'm exaggerating here a little bit. All of a sudden I thought, well, if we can't convince them to take some of their poor people, well, let's take some of their rich people. And what you've seen, you can see this with some of the towers here, and you see more income coming back into the city. And I would argue that in civilization, you saw more wealth in the hearts of cities. And I think you probably see that more in London and Paris, that the wealth stayed in the city. And I always joke about Fiddler on the Roof. If I were a rich man, where would I build my house? Right in the center of the town. But in America, it became, oh, if you're rich, you have to move outside the city. I actually think that's changing in America, and I think it's changing in Milwaukee as well, where there are, not everybody, because it's different strokes for different folks, but people with income are saying, well, yeah, there's great restaurants, we're near the festivals, we're near the lake, let's live downtown, let's enjoy the urban area. I think that creates a more diverse city. And I think it's good to have different levels of income, because the fact is we still have Milwaukee, I think second only to San Antonio, where we have the highest concentration of low-income people located in the city proper of any metropolitan areas in the country. So I need to find ways, and this is not a negative towards low-income people. I embrace everything we need to do there. But for the fiscal condition of the city, we have to have that. And I think for society, you don't want to have this stratification where people are just so separated by wealth.
A couple more questions on this issue of economic development, jobs, that kind of thing. One of them deals with the group, the M7, which is, as you know, it's this regional organization. And as part of this sort of regional compact, there was this decision made that municipalities would not rate each other for businesses. And I have to ask you this question. Has that pact sort of gone out the window with, we saw, a couple of companies from the central city of Milwaukee either go to Menominee Falls or Oak Creek. We saw Strauss in Franklin coming to Milwaukee. Is that pact no longer in effect?
I think it's still in effect. I think there are some that honor it more than others. We've always taken the approach, and I was one of the founders of M7.
Right.
So just to be clear, and I did that because I felt that we as a region, and I still feel this very, very much so, that if you look at regions of the country, our challenge isn't so much our city, is our region hasn't grown. That's the challenge. So
why is that?
That's a good question. I think some of it's the infighting. I think some of it is, weather. Things like that. I mean, there's obviously some parts of the country that are hotter than others right now. But Minneapolis is not one that's hotter weather-wise, but it's hotter economically. And I think some of it is how the metropolitan area is viewed by the rest of the state. And again, this is where I think our relations with the state, I think it's a problem. There's no question that's a problem.
Are you worried going forward that the demographics of Milwaukee work against it, that compared to some cities that seem to be attracting more and more young folks, we will at some point in the not too distant future have an aging workforce? We will have real challenges meeting the needs of employers?
I think that is certainly an issue, but I think we can turn that around. I totally believe we've got the ingredients right now, and we've actually got some momentum to turn that around. I think Milwaukee, and I'll give you another example, and this is, I'll toot my own horn here. If you think of the hot cities, there are places like Portland or Denver or Seattle. And what those cities do is they embrace economic growth, but they're also cities that are strong on sustainability or environmentalism or quality of life. My vision for the city is we've got the lake, or as I describe it, the fresh coast. That's a huge asset. It's a huge asset. So we've got fresh water. We've got 3 rivers that feed into it. And I call it the trifecta. And we're basically there. And what I mean by that is, and it started with the Milwaukee River and the River Walk, and the businesses that are now along the Milwaukee River, we've turned that around. The Menominee River and the Menominee Valley, you've got thousands of jobs now there, as well as the Hank Aaron Trail and sustainability. On the south side, at Kinnickinnick, that's where Komatsu is going to be. You'll have hundreds of jobs there, and you'll have the longest extension of the Riverwalk. So for all 3 of our rivers, we've got positive economic activity supported by strong sustainability and environmental measures. That, to me, is a recipe for success. And I call it the trifecta. And I think as cities and young people look at this, they're going to look at this and say, hey, Milwaukee, I want this to be a place where I stay or I come. And we need that. We need to rotate the crops and have more people come in. There's no question about that.
Are we doing enough, Mayor, and what can a mayor do to encourage a a vibrant ecosystem for entrepreneurship. Because you see the studies like I do, and they show Milwaukee really lagging on the back end of this. What do we need to be doing differently?
Well, I think you're starting...
Is there a role for city government?
I think there's a role, but I think this is really private sector driven more than anything. I really do. And I'm anxious to have the city play a part in it. But it's investors, and how do we get, whether it's startup money or scale-up money, how do we get those investors to want to invest here? And I think the ties to the university are strong. I think you've got major players like Northwestern Mutual and Aurora and Johnson Controls that recognize this, and some of it is their desire to continue to be strong here. But I think it's changing the vibe of the city, and I feel positive about that.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about crime in the city, and I guess the first thing on the agenda is who will be the police chief. And there have been some reports out there, some chatter that has indicated that maybe Chief Morales' contract would not be renewed. How do you feel about the renewal of Chief Morales' contract?
Well, let me just say this. I am not what I would say a soulmate of President Trump, if I can say that. Don't share that with anybody. And I always bristle when he talks about fake news. This is the closest I've seen in fake news, because I've had these questions toward me, and I said, I support the chief. Homicides are down, non-fatal shootings are down, robberies are down, carjackings are down. I support the chief. And there was a conservative talk show host that wanted to keep beating this, and everybody keeps asking me, thinking, how many times can I say I support the chief? So I support the chief.
So when the Fire and Police Commission, so when the Fire and Police Commission makes a decision this Friday, and let's say they say we recommend that he be renewed, you would be supportive of that?
Yeah. And I don't know for sure. I wouldn't be surprised if they
were
lay
to
out
do that.
The process.
You mentioned crime stats that are down. Do you think people feel like Milwaukee is a safer place?
No, I don't. No, because I think any crime, certainly if it affects you, the crime rate's 100%, right? And I think some of these crimes are unbelievably audacious, and I get contacted whenever these crimes, and
where somebody gets in an auto accident and somebody pulls out a gun
it's unbelievable.
and shoots someone.
It's unbelievable. And is that policing? I mean, you tell me. What are we supposed to do with that situation? Some of this is human behavior, which is just so far off the track. And access to guns. I mean, people don't like to talk about guns. And last week, a number of municipalities held a press conference, and we asked the legislature and the governor to work together on guns. And we did so because every time there is a mass shooting and we say the same thing, they say, oh, you're trying to capitalize on the tragedy. Well, last week there was no tragedy, and we asked it, and so it doesn't get covered that much. But there still is a huge problem there with access to guns. And the one that I will go back to over and over and over again is the shooting at the spa in Brookfield several years ago. Because people have to understand this. This was a situation where the system worked. And what I mean by that is one of the women there was afraid of her estranged husband. And so she went to court. And she got a domestic violence restraining order. She used the system. She got it. So what did he do? He knew he could not go into a registered gun dealer. And so what did he do? He went to armslist.com, the website. I need a gun. I've seen the email. I need a gun. I need it fast. So they meet in the parking lot of a McDonald's, I think in Germantown. Gets the gun, no questions asked, goes and murders 3 women and kills himself. That's what happens when you allow these sales to occur without checking the background. He had a domestic violence restraining order against him. Now you could say, well, he was hell-bent on killing. Okay, I'll grant you that. Then why are we making it easy for him? If we know he's hell-bent on killing people, then shouldn't we be doing something to make it more difficult to do that? Instead of saying, oh, just go to this website and meet somebody in a McDonald's parking lot who's happy to sell you a gun out of their truck. That's what's going on right now.
The city has taken this approach that violence is a public health issue. Do you think that's been effective?
I think that there are signs that it can be helpful. I think it's part of what we need to do. I don't think there's a single answer to all of this, and there's going to be a debate, and I guarantee there'll be a debate on the Common Council because you've got some members of the council who are mad that there are fewer cops, and there are going to be some members of the Common Council who want even fewer cops and more money put into treating crime as a public health issue. To all of them, I say, help me get more resources. Because if you look at, and Oakland's been used as an example, as I said, that was a referendum that happened there. In Chicago, they've got probably 13,600 cops in Chicago. On a per capita basis, if we had the same, we'd have about 8,100. And
you've got fewer than 2,000, right?
And we've got fewer than 2,000. I mean, what I'm saying is that's what, if we multiplied our size times 4.5, that's where we'd be. So they have a lot more cops per capita in Chicago. So for those who are saying, get rid of more cops, I'm saying, whoa, there's a limit because response time is also a real issue. It's a real issue. And I also want my cops to be out there on this crazy driving, on the reckless driving. I want them to be monitoring that as well. So it's a tightrope. There's no question it's a tightrope.
Speaking of public health, let's talk about the lead pipe issue for a moment. I think this morning your office announced that you've got a federal grant that will be used towards the lead pipe remediation or replacement. What exactly will that grant do? What difference does it make?
Well, that's a lead paint one, and I'll go back to
lead paint one.
Yeah, so let me go back to that issue.
Okay.
Because
there really are two different.
Yeah, I was on a panel right here.
Right, in this room.
On that issue. When I talked about this, and I use my own family, because people say, oh, politicians, they're two-faced. Believe it or not, I've heard that. People say they're two-faced. So my family lives on the west side in the Washington Heights neighborhood, and our house is a little over 100 years old. And we've got 4 kids, and when we moved there, the kids were really little. And when we moved in, my wife, who's the boss of the house, no question about that, she said, we're going to get rid of the lead paint in this house. And so she hired a contractor, and we had the lead paint come in, particularly in the playroom and the basement, because she felt that the lead paint issue was by far the most serious health issue for my biological kids. When the lead in the laterals came out, I came home, sort of father knows best, and says, we're talking about this at work, and one of the things you should do is run the water for 3 to 5 minutes. And she said, I've been doing that since we moved in here. So again, you can see who has a handle on things that you just, if you're in an older home, you should run the water. Now, it was on this panel when the expert from Virginia Tech said,
Mark Edwards, yeah.
if you've got kids under the age of 6, he did not feel that was enough. And I left this room and went and said that if you've got kids under the age of 6, get water filters. Get water filters. So you've got 2 different issues. You've got the lead paint issue, and you've got the lead lateral issue. So in my budget, we're going to have over $21 million to deal with these issues. In the sales tax, back to the sales tax, the way it's structured is the first, it raises about $160 million a year. The first quarter of that would go to property tax relief, and then the next 7% would go to a public health initiative, which I envision to be a lead initiative. Because I think then you could have a steady stream of income, both for lead paint remediation and lead lateral replacement over a 15-year period, getting about $11 million a year, not open exclusively to the city. The suburbs would be open to it as well, but the issue is primarily in the city, and that would give us a long-term fix on this. Now, at the same time, what I announced this morning was a $5.6 million grant from the federal government on the lead paint issue. And what's significant about that is we had problems in the health department 2 years ago. And this is not only the dollars are important, but the recognition that we've got our house in order. That's important to me.
So I've got a bunch of questions. Is the house in order in the health department right now?
I think that there's still work to be done, but certainly, again, the fact that the federal government is saying we now feel confident that we can move forward. One of the other issues there, maybe not surprisingly, is getting the workforce to remediate the homes as well. And I think, again, having a long-term steady stream of income to do that would give contractors more of a confidence that this is an area where you want to invest. because they could see down the road 10 years that there's going to be work.
You mentioned the lead pipe issue. What, about 70,000 homes in Milwaukee?
That sounds about right.
About
Yeah.
70,000. So they have this problem, and they need to be replaced at some point. In the meantime, as you mentioned, that for kids under 6, recommended using water filters. Are you completely confident that that's a way to minimize safety, risks? And I ask that because of what's happened in Newark. And that we've seen stories in the last few weeks about the water in Newark and the EPA saying, we're concerned. Even though they're using filters,
Right.
we still are concerned about potential safety
Yes,
issues.
and of course I'm concerned about it. And that's why in our conversations about the sales tax, what would happen in the budget and this is again where I'm asking you for your help. Governor Evers put money into his budget for more lead laterals.
$40 million, I think it was. Yeah.
Right, and the response from the legislature is, we don't want to do that. Most of that money is going to go to Milwaukee. Milwaukee should handle this problem themselves.
Locally.
And so my response is, okay, I'm willing to do that, but I need a revenue source. Let me go to my voters, because the whole sales tax is built on the premise that in April of next year, we would go to our voters and we would say, do you support a 1-cent sales tax? Now, the major amount of money goes to the county. The city of Milwaukee gets a second amount, and then the suburbs all the suburbs would share in it as well. I'm willing to take that to the voters and ask them that question, because that would allow me to eliminate this cut to the police department of 60 officers. It would allow me to pave more roads. It would allow me to deal with the lead issue. There's a fire rig that the fire chief wanted, he couldn't get. And I think we could put more money into crime prevention as well. But I need to be able to go to my voters and say, do you want to do this? And that's where the frustration is, that we can't get the legislature, and they want this to just die in the sleep. They don't want to take a vote on it. But I don't know of another state where you've got the major city that is that constrained from a revenue standpoint.
You still think back to the filters, you still think that's the best thing that people could do right now?
Right now, again, if I had kids at that age or grandkids at that age, that's what I would be doing. But do I think we have to do more? Yes. And it's an aging infrastructure issue. So, but I think the other part is, and I'm not defensive on this, if you have 70,000 homes, they were all built before, say, 1951. 70,000 homes weren't built in 1950. And so obviously it's going to take longer than 1 year to deal with this. But I do feel a sense of urgency, to answer your question directly. And that's why I'm asking the legislature for a dedicated funding source for this.
And again, you touched on this, but you've heard the argument from state legislators. They've said, this is a local issue that, Madison solved it on its own, didn't ask the state for money, that I think Green Bay's in the process of solving it. Milwaukee should solve it too.
I'm willing to solve it. That's my point. I'm willing to solve it.
But they have to give you the sales tax.
Yeah,
increase.
but again, I'll go back to if you have a situation where the budget for your Milwaukee Police Department is larger than your entire property tax levy, if you're facing a $100 million addition to pension payments in 2023, where are you going to get the money? And when people talk about glasses being half full or half empty, my response is always, just go back and fill the water up again. Just go back and so let's just get things done. My view is let's get things done, but I need to have that partnership.
There are still some, I don't know, how can I say this? Some people are still not convinced of the value of the streetcar. Isn't that a nice, polite way of saying it?
Well, I can tell you I've had the honor over the last 7 years of meeting every person who hates it.
That's good. I like that. So what is the status of the streetcar? You want to expand it, and yet the council seems to be a little hesitant right now. What's going on there?
What's interesting, when I first started thinking about this, I went out to Portland, and they said, just so you know, this is going to be the end of Western civilization as you know it before it's built. And then once it opens, the debate is going to change to how do I get it extended to my neighborhood? And that's exactly what's happened, because our original plan, and the engineering was done to get it up towards Brady Street. We didn't have enough money to get there, so we went to Ogden. As we move forward, I was sensitive to the argument that this should not just be for people downtown, for a yuppie thing. And we have a very racially diverse city. So I said, no, I want the next legs to go up Martin Luther King Drive to
Bronzeville.
North Avenue, into the African-American neighborhood. And I want a southern leg to go down to Walker's Point towards the the Hispanic neighborhood. And so we sort of got caught in the crosshairs a little bit on the south side because I think there the issue was some people wanted it more in different directions, which is, again, that's politics, that's fine. On the north side, and this was more interesting, is the concern, which is a valid concern, that because the streetcar has been so successful, the concern is, will property values go up so dramatically that people who live there will not be able to stay there, the displacement issue. And so we've been working with a number of individuals and organizations to create a fund so that if you see a rapid increase in your property taxes, and you're on a fixed income or a low income, that would not force you to sell your house. But the reason I mentioned that one is underlying that argument is actually the fear or the recognition that this is working. In other words, if people didn't think it was going to be so positive and increase property values, they wouldn't care about this.
Do you think the ridership, and we've seen some of the numbers, is the ridership where you thought it would be?
The ridership is better than I thought it would be. Yeah. Absolutely. Now, again, I give a lot of thanks to Potawatomi, but as we see it when we start charging, we're looking at basically $1 fare. I think.
When do you think that'll happen?
Hopefully 4 or 5 months after I die. I can't give you an exact time. So.
But that's actually a serious question.
Well, and I don't know the answer. We're trying to, again, Potawatomi's goes through November, but we think we've been able to find it. We're able to get some federal dollars. Obviously, the state has limited our ability to use state dollars, but I think it certainly has had a value. I think it's been a success.
Do you think, and I liken this to the news media, so newspapers when the interwebs began, so the thinking was, well, we're going to put all our information out there for free. People got very accustomed to that. And now newspapers are trying to figure out, how do we repair this business model? How do we get people to pay for content that they have long thought of as free? Does the same thing, in a certain way, happen to the streetcar, where people get very used to riding it for free? I mean, I've even seen some estimates, I think people at City Hall say maybe 40% decrease in ridership.
I don't know what the number will be. Again, do I think there'll be fewer people? Probably. But our estimates, July, and I'll give you, again, sort of demonstration. When we were first planning it, we had some concerns, and Bastille Days had some concerns as to what it would do, because it goes right down Kilburn, right through Bastille Days, and what it would do. And we finally worked out a compromise, and we made it work. This was the best Bastille Days ever. And I think part of the reason is because you could park your car at one end and take the streetcar, or park your car at the other end. They had more people than ever before. They were ecstatic with it. My goal is to have more people in the heart of the city. I like the activity in the city. I like a vibrant downtown. I like a vibrant heart. And I think that makes us attractive. Going back to the young people, when we were 16, on my 16th birthday, at 8:30 in the morning, I flunked my driver's test, okay? I couldn't wait to do it. Now kids, 16, 17, 18, I don't want to drive. I don't want to drive. They want to have it. You're talking about how you attract and keep young people. I think public transportation is a big part of that.
Realistically, Mayor, how soon do you think you can move forward with expansion of the
It'll be interesting to see whether the council moves this year to get in place the engineering toward North Avenue, because we rely on the TIF financing, and there's some legal limits as to how long you can use a TIF. And so that's a short window. So I don't know what they'll do, but they would need to act on that leg before the end of the year.
And do you have enough money to handle the operating costs in the budget? I mean, that's one of the criticisms.
And I think over time, again, that's where we'll have to use the fare box over time. No question about that.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about the Democratic National Convention. I know you're excited about it now, but I'll bet you have some nerves about this. What keeps you up at night thinking about that convention?
Well, let me tell a story first, if I can brag for a minute. Can I brag?
Sure.
So when we had the team come here, we gave them a tour of Fiserv Forum. And the tour of Fiserv Forum was Tuesday morning. And the ribbon cutting for the arena was Sunday at noon. So it was brand spanking new. And as I said to them, I said, this arena is so amazing. The Bucks have never lost a game here. And so that was a plus. But the next day, and this gets to the politics of things and why this is important. I was coming down to make the sales pitch as to why Milwaukee. And as we were pulling up, I said to my security guy, just a second, I want to check something. And so I Googled Democratic National Convention locations. And so if you ever get on Jeopardy, the first Democratic National Convention was 1832 in Baltimore. The next 4 or 5 were all in Baltimore. Then they may have gone to Charlotte or Charleston, and then they went back in 1860. They had to have 2 conventions. That's when they sort of splintered and when Lincoln was elected. Then they went to Chicago, New York. Long story short, through the 1900s, they'd go to Chicago. But I checked to see when was the last time the Democratic Convention was in the Midwest other than Chicago. And so I went through the list. And so when I was making the presentation, I said, the last time the Democrats had their convention in the Midwest other than Chicago was St. Louis in 1916. So 100 years. So it's time for the Democrats to come to the Midwest. In contrast, the Republicans in the last 30 years have been to Kansas City, they've been to Detroit, they've been to Cleveland, they've been to St. Paul, they're going to Charlotte this year. It's the Democrats who need to be here. So fast forward now, so we get the convention. I am not at all concerned about the hotels. I think the challenge is obviously for the delegates, but the fact of the matter is the reason that they made the clusters that they did was so that they could have sort of a critical mass in 5 different areas. So you've got Milwaukee Central, you've got Milwaukee Airport, you've got the western suburbs, then you've got 3 right over the state line, which is consistent with what I've always said, that Chicago is one of our finest suburbs, that you've got all that right there. And I've been to conventions in the past where you're in a bus for 45 minutes to an hour. So here, it's a more, assuming the I-94 work is pretty much done, it's more realistic, the timing. So I'm not as perplexed about that at all. Obviously, we have to raise a lot of money. It's expensive. We do get our security costs reimbursed in large by the federal government. Both Charlotte and Milwaukee will get between a $50 and $50 million appropriation from Congress to do that. I see it as a huge upside for the city. It's the first time in the history of the state we've ever had anything like this.
You talk to some people and they see it as a game changer, a chance for Milwaukee to sort of reestablish itself as an up-and-coming city in the United States. Is that naive? I mean, I've been to a few conventions too over time. I'm not sure they really changed the way I thought about a city. Does it really make that big a difference to people?
I sort of question that, but at the same time, my oldest child moved out to Denver this summer, and my wife and I just went out there this weekend for the first time, and I'm trying to remember where I was, but somebody was saying to me, things really started changing after the Democratic National Convention in 2008. Because people notice the city, and people are going to notice our city for good and for the challenges we have. And I think we're up for it. And again, just to be bipartisan, I would love to have us host the 2024 Republican National Convention. I think this puts us in the category of being a city that can host the Final Four in hockey or women's basketball or men's basketball. This is a game changer in terms of having a national convention of this size and stature.
A quick question about convention. Are we likely to see an expansion of the convention center, do you think, in the next couple of years?
I think we will.
Construction begins?
Yeah, I think we will. I hope
and that
so.
would make a difference, too, for attracting
Yep.
these kinds of events.
I think we will.
I have to ask you about your political future. And I guess the first question would be, obviously, you're intending to run for re-election, unless you'd like to announce something here that is contrary to that. I don't think so. But I got to ask you, is that the last time you would run for re-election?
Well, let me just say, I love my job. I swear more than I used to. But I love my job. I love the challenges of the job. I love the people aspect of it. I love the diversity of the city. I think there's a lot of good things going on, and I think there's some real challenges. And again, you look at the areas where I want us to focus is on getting more family supporting jobs. I'm never going to say never for anything. I mean, there's just no reason to say I'm not going to do this. I don't know. I'm still hoping that the Bucks will pick me up for some position or something like that. But I love this job. Again, I just want to be clear about that.
Do you see in the next 4 years if you were reelected. What becomes the priorities then for you? What would you like to do that prior to now you really haven't been able to accomplish?
Well, I had hoped right now we would be farther along in Century City, for example, and it's an education, because I really had to rattle some cages, I think, to get interest in getting private investment there. I need more private investment there, and I think people are beginning to hear what I'm saying, but I'm going to say it even louder and longer, because I really do think having family supporting jobs, and some would say it's simplistic, but I think it's real. If you have a family supporting jobs, that goes a long way to address a lot of these issues that we face as a city. And somehow we've got off track as a society saying, well, yeah, the jobs can be 35 minutes away or 40 minutes away. I want us to put a focus on having family supporting jobs in the neighborhoods in this city where people need the jobs.
Is there anything that the mayor can do at this point to deal with the issue of education? And I'm not singling out MPS, I'm not singling out
I would say yes.
choice.
Yes, absolutely.
So what is it?
Well, I think every city is different. And you may recall 10 years ago, I made a move to have the mayor directly involved, and was roundly rejected, frankly, by both political parties. Some of it was the political timing. I think a year and a half ago, you saw the county executive doing something, and that didn't happen either. I meet with the superintendent on a regular basis. I think we now have an Office of Early Education, and we want to beef that up. I think without getting into the K4 through 12 area, I think there's things the city can do. Milwaukee Succeeds, I think we can do more there. And I continue to believe in Milwaukee Succeeds. I think we have to retailer that, and I think everybody involved in that recognizes that mission can't go away, even if we have as many challenges as we had 4 or 5 years ago. So it's something that will always be on my front burner, because there's no question. There's just no, in the real world, people make a decision where to live, oftentimes based on the quality of education their kids are going to receive. And in addition to that, the workforce issues. Those are real important issues for the development of the future of the city. Will we have the kids that are going to go into these STEM areas, for example? Are they going to have enough education? And I think there are STEM jobs all up and down the ladder. It's not whether you're a software engineer, up and down the ladder. There are economic opportunities there, and we have to be more nimble in that.
So let me have you respond to what is likely to be one of the arguments made by your opponents in the upcoming election. And it will go something along the lines of it is time for a change. The mayor's had his chance. Our city is more diverse. Our city has had an infusion of youthful energy in it. And we need somebody who represents that population. Why shouldn't we make a change?
First of all, I'll be running on my record, and I think that we've got a lot to show for what we've done. I obviously still have a lot of enthusiasm for the job. I have a lot of energy for the job, and I think I've done a good job. And obviously, I'm going to have my detractors. That comes with this job. This is a job where you make decisions, and when you make decisions, someone's happy and someone's unhappy. I describe it more like a baseball season where you play 162 games as opposed to an NFL season. I'm making decisions every day. And I think right now we're at a point where if we continue what we've begun with the work in creating jobs in the central city on the north side and the south side, and again, I'm proud of that, continue this renaissance in the downtown area. Obviously the northwest side, there's things going on there right now with Northridge. That's a priority area for me as well. I think that there's a lot more good things that can happen. Obviously, we're going to have a new mayor at some point. I just happen to think I'm doing a good job right now.
Well, what do you think, Will, and I've eaten up most of the time, I apologize, that's my fault today. What do you think is going to happen at Northridge? I mean, that's been a property that has really been a blighted property for years now.
So, as you may know, we are in legal proceedings right now.
I know, it's gone on for a while.
It's a raise order. No, this is actually a relatively new, this was a raise order that went out earlier this year. And a raise order is based on the health and safety conditions of the building and the cost to remediate it. That our Department of Neighborhood Services felt that the cost of repairing it was more than the legal threshold that the state has set. The owners are fighting that. There was a tragedy that occurred not long after this began, where a man lost his life. That's not a good situation, a health and safety situation when someone loses their life there. Our argument is based on the health and safety concerns that are present there now. And that's where I'll leave it right now.
Mm-hmm. And to the opposite end of the spectrum, is the couture on Milwaukee's lakefront ever going to be built?
I certainly hope so.
It's important because of the streetcar,
And Rick
aspect.
Barrett, who's no relation to me, just to be clear, he was the one who did the Moderne, which is the first high-rise on the west side of the river, and he had a lot of detractors, and he got it done. And so his track record gives me hope. Now, I can't guarantee it, but his track record gives me hope.
All right. I'm going to offer up one question. Who has the best question of the day? It's got to be a really good question, though, so... Is it a good question? Good. All right. We'll have wait for the microphone and we'll let you ask it.
So in 2014, you signed an order that the Common Council passed through that lifted the taxi cab ban. And in the years since then, we've also seen the streetcar get expanded. There have been battles with the county government in order to try to improve bus routes. And also we currently have the implementation of the electronic scooter pilot programs in the city. At the same time this is happening, we've seen an increase in cars on Milwaukee's roads, and last year I think there was a record number of car accidents. What do you think the city needs to do to possibly reverse some of the, I'm not going to say the word damage because that feels a little harsh, but to reverse some of the effects that we have seen by removing this cap on taxi cabs that is not creating a sustainable city right now?
Well, I would say that since 2014, the landscape in transportation in that 5-year period has changed maybe more than it did in a century. Because it's not just what you mentioned, but you can throw in the bubbler bikes. You can throw in Uber and Lyft. The transportation networks, if you will, are more diverse than I've ever seen in my life. And I think we all would agree with that. All agree with that. And I think that that's good. I think the more people have ways to get around, the more choices they have. I just want them to be here and to move around. That's what I want to have happen. I don't see the taxi cab issue as being a driver one way or the other in the car accidents. And I think that's a separate issue, which is a very important issue, because without a doubt, I think we've also seen more reckless driving, which is very troubling to me. And again, one of the reasons I want to make sure that we don't have an even deeper cut to the police department. I want us to be able to harness our energies to make sure that we're catching the bad drivers.
Final question. How are the scooters going in Milwaukee?
The scooters
because the city raised some concerns about that.
Well, the scooters are the biggest generational gap issue that I've seen in this job. I'm not kidding you.
No, I believe that.
I'm not kidding. And again, I go to all 4 of my kids who are in their 20s. Dad, what's the issue? Every one of my kids. Dad, what's the issue? And then I go to people who are getting even closer to middle age, as I describe us, who are irritated by it. But again, just about every city I've gone to, they're there. Now, what I did do, because when I signed the ordinance into law, maybe 2 or 3 days later, I was walking sort of near the MAC, because I remember where I was, and all of a sudden there's a guy coming right at me on the sidewalk on a scooter. And the law says, no. And he's coming right at me, and I'm like, and he got up. Now, I don't know if he knew I was the mayor or I was standing there and get out of the street. But 2 days later, we had a press conference, and my wife's a teacher. She's a 4th grade teacher, and her argument is, as a teacher, you have to get control of the kids right away, or you're never going to get them. So we had a press conference, and I just said, look, this is a pilot program. If people don't abide by the law, it's going to end. And we sent a stronger message to the companies, because their first message on their phones was, we recommend that you do this. I'm like, no, you don't recommend anything. The law is you don't ride it on the sidewalk. Do we have 100% compliance? No. Has the compliance gone up? I think it's gone up markedly. So
I'm going to wrap things up there. Again, I apologize for eating into audience questions today. That's my bad. But we're going to have obviously many more events coming up in the remainder of the semester. Kelly Thompson, the state public defender, will be here, I think, for our next On the Issues event. On the 21st, we are doing a national event. It is the release of a Marquette Law School poll that looks specifically at attitudes about the U.S. Supreme Court. It'll be a really good event with some excellent panelists who will take part. And so there is, I believe, some seating still available for that. Check our website, law.marquette.edu, for more information about any of these events. Having said that, thanks to everybody for their time, their interest, their attention, and most of all, thanks to Mayor Tom Barrett for being with us today. Mayor?
thank you, Michael.